Get some! All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Jake Uger, Atticus Sperry with you guys. Oh my God, are there aliens? Bloop, 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 bloop. We're gonna discuss that first in a second. Later in the program, did Trump know? And when did he know it? Interesting. Casper.
All right, let's talk about these unidentified objects in the air that we've been shooting down over the weekend. The United States has shot down yet another unidentified object on Sunday, making it the fourth taken down over North America in less than 2 weeks. The latest was shot down just over Lake Huron in Michigan. While US officials have been weirdly tight-lipped in describing what the unidentified objects were, even going so far as to referring to them as high-altitude objects, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has confirmed in a cable news interview that it is in fact, or they were in fact, balloons. Let's watch.
The military and the intelligence are focused like a laser on first gathering and accumulating the information, then coming up with a comprehensive analysis of what went on before, what's going on now, and what could go on in the future. You can be sure that if any American interests or people are at risk, they'll take appropriate action. Until they get that comprehensive analysis, however, we have to look at each balloon individually.
Were these
and see
balloons
what
Friday and Saturday night?
They believe they were, yes, but much smaller than the first one. Both of those, one over Canada, one over Alaska, were at 40,000 feet. Immediately, it was determined that that's a danger to commercial aircraft, which also fly at 40,000 feet. And so, the second one, in cooperation with the Canadians, the first one with the Americans, took it down.
So they took it down again, 3 over the weekend, beginning on Friday, and then of course, prior to that, there was the much larger Chinese surveillance balloon, alleged Chinese surveillance balloon that was shot down right off the coast of South Carolina. A national security spokesperson said the objects over Canada and Alaska did not closely resemble and were much smaller than the suspected Chinese spy balloon that was shot down on February 4th. Cenk.
Okay, first of all, let's be honest about this. Obviously, aliens. Because you know what aliens said? Balloons. Okay, if that's the best technology aliens have, ladies and gentlemen, we got them. New right-wing conspiracy theory, obviously, right away. They were in fact aliens, illegal aliens sent by the Communist Chinese Party. Okay, look guys, they have not yet recovered the 3 that they shot down over the weekend, at least the 2 in Alaska and in Canada for sure. And so Admiral Kirby just did a press conference very recently, right before we went live, and representing the Pentagon, the US government, et cetera. He said, look, they're not aliens, okay? They're not, as far as we know. But what are they? We haven't gotten them yet, right? So that's fair. A lot of this got sparked by a Pentagon spokesperson over the weekend saying, I'm not ruling anything out.
Okay, they're not aliens. Okay, let's just move on. Okay, we don't know what they are. We don't know who sent them. We don't know if there's like nefarious motives behind it. We just shoot them down and that's it. That's what's happening. That's all we know. Okay, the speculation is nonsense. It's a giant waste of time. I'm not even entertaining it.
Okay, they're not being entertained. We're moving forward.
Yeah.
I got one other funny part of it. Representative Slotnick from Michigan, she was informed before these things were shot down, and so was another Democratic congressman from Michigan, and they both were praising the courage of our fighter pilots for shooting it down. I was like, they're unmanned. I'm not sure it takes a ton of courage to shoot down a balloon. But anyways, are they spying? That's the actual question. Likely, but we don't know.
Yeah, of course they are. Of course they are. Every country that has the capability to spy on us spies on us, and we spy on other countries.
No.
That's what happens.
I'm told by
happens.
the mainstream press.
And we spend hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. We increase the military budget every single goddamn year. And wouldn't you know it, this situation is being exploited for calls for what? More military funding. In fact, why don't we go to this next video featuring House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Turner. Get a load of what he has to say about this.
Are you glad that they shot down these two objects? Because obviously you and other Republicans were critical for that the Biden team took as long as they did to shoot down the object that was clearly a Chinese spy balloon.
Sure, as I was saying, I would prefer them to be trigger happy than to be permissive. But we're going to have to see whether or not this is just the administration trying to change headlines. But what I think this shows, which is probably more important to our policy discussion here, is that we really have to declare that we're going to defend our airspace, and then we need to invest. What's become clear in the public discussion is that we don't really have adequate radar systems. We certainly don't have an integrated missile defense system. We're going to have to begin to look at the United States airspace as one that we need to defend and that we need to have appropriate sensors to do so. This shows some of the problems and gaps that we have. We need to fill those as soon as possible because we certainly now ascertain there is a threat.
We don't have an adequate missile defense system? That's what he just said. He said we don't have an adequate missile defense system. That's weird. Is the military somehow underfunded? Do we not have the resources to have an adequate missile defense system? I don't know. Why don't we look at the numbers? Let's start with graphic 5 here. In fiscal year 2023, the US government, total US government spending for defense, including military defense, veterans affairs, and foreign policy, is budgeted to be about 1,168.4 billion. Now, military spending, just military spending alone, is budgeted at $808.6 billion, okay? Let's go to the next graphic, give you a better idea of just how much military funding has increased each consecutive year. 2021, it was $753.9 billion. The amount appropriated for 2024, $836.5 billion. In fact, the last time they voted for the military budget, they actually offered even more than what the Biden administration was asking for. So where's the money going? How do we not have an adequate missile defense system? I mean, it is amazing how much money gets funneled from the bottom to the top in this country. In the case of military spending, from the hard-earned taxpayer money of fellow citizens being redistributed all the way to private defense contractor executives who do what with it? What do they do with it? If we don't have an adequate missile defense system, what the hell does the money go toward? That's what I want to know. That's the only thing that matters in this story. Everything else is nonsense, everything.
Yeah. So let me just double down on what Anna's saying. So he says we don't have an adequate missile defense system. Then what are we spending the other $1.1 trillion on? Because this is supposed to be a Department of Defense. These are supposed to be defense systems. I've seen us start many wars, totally useless wars that got our kids killed and our trillions of dollars misspent, right? But we don't have a missile defense system that can spot a balloon. And by the way, the first balloon was 2,000 feet long, apparently, and the size of 3 buses. We don't have a missile defense system for that. What the hell did we spend? Obviously, you took the 1.1 trillion and you stuffed it into your pockets. So why don't you just be honest about that? And it's interesting that Jake Tapper, whenever we talk about Medicare for all, something that would give universal health care that every other developed nation has, he says, oh, you're gonna pay for that, All of a sudden, this guy comes out here, it's like 1.1 trillion is not enough. We need new missile defense systems that my donors want. And Tapper didn't ask him how he's gonna pay for that. What a shock. By the way, he threw in there, it's certainly a Chinese spy balloon. It's very likely a Chinese spy balloon, but you don't actually know that. But just to like demagogue and fearmonger and create a bigger defense budget, Tapper's sure, he's absolutely sure, we all gotta pile in the money here. And of course, this lunatic Republican congressman, they all are, it says things like, yeah, they're trying to distract with these things. What do you mean? Are you saying that the Biden administration sent the balloons and then shot them down? What do you mean they're trying to distract? But Tapper, does he call him out on that? Of course not, of course not. The beloved Republicans must be respected, even when they say crazy things that make no sense at all. And of course he added in, I'd rather have them be trigger happy. let's shoot first, spend pork barrel money on crony capitalism first, okay, and then figure out things later.
It's the American way. It's what we do best.
Both sides are going to use this, Democrats and Republicans. They'll fight over nonsense about who balloons, which balloons, aliens, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, when the voting happens, both sides are going to agree 100% on spending more on corrupt defense contractors that apparently can't even protect us from goddamn balloons.
That's right. All right, well, let's do some international news, starting with this. Now, hundreds of thousands of Israelis went on strike and protested out of the Knesset this morning in response to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's efforts to weaken the country's judicial system. He's specifically proposing to weaken the country's highest court, Israel's Supreme Court. In fact, protests have been taking place in Israel for the last 6 weeks. Now, Netanyahu's coalition advanced this legislation that would overhaul the country's top court and voted to send the first of 2 bills to parliament for a vote, even with opposition from President Joe Biden and the demonstrators in his own country. Now, Netanyahu, to give you some more details, has sought to fast track the legislation, which would weaken oversight of legislation by Israel's Supreme Court and give lawmakers the power to appoint judges, among other changes. Now, the way the system of government is set up in Israel does share parallels or similarities to what we have here in the United States. The courts or the judicial branch is supposed to serve as a check to parliament, but Benjamin Netanyahu, who by the way is facing his own serious corruption investigation, is looking to weaken the oversight power that the country's Supreme Court has. Netanyahu says the legislative changes are needed to curb Israel's overly activist judges, rein in alleged judicial corruption, and increase diversity on the bench. His opponents say they amount to an end to judicial checks and balances and a governmental takeover of the Supreme Court, which many Israelis consider the last bastion of the country's democracy. Before we get to some more footage of the protests from this past weekend, Cenk, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, so I've often complimented the Israeli Supreme Court. I've criticized them from time to time too. Of course, unfortunately, as with many parts of the Israeli government, they have their absurd rulings too against Palestinians oftentimes. But they do also often have fair rulings, and they're largely independent from parliament, and they do a way better job of checking corruption than our Supreme Court does. I mean, 1 billion times better. So it is one of the best parts of the Israeli government, and you do sometimes even get them checking the Israeli government on some of their worst abuses. Oftentimes they excuse the worst abuses as well. So it's a mixed bag in that department, but overall, one of the best institutions in Israel. So now what you're seeing is secular citizens, and look at that, you see that? It's the same dynamic. There's all these people who think, oh, certain ethnic groups do this or certain religions do that. No, it's in every country, you have the right wing, which is usually filled with fundamentalist zealots, and you have secular people. Now, all the secular citizens that are showing up here in the protests, they're not all necessarily left-wingers as we would describe them or progressives. A lot of them are, by the way. So look at all those progressive Israeli citizens, right? But yes, there are even some religious groups in there and other folks who are saying, yeah, look, I don't know how I feel about Palestinians, or I don't know how I feel about this or that, but I do know I don't want us to be run by fundamentalist clerics and have my rights stripped away. And a lot of people showed up in Handmaid's Tale outfits too, because the Supreme Court, if its power is taken away and its independence is taken away, could really harm secular rights inside Israel.
Now, despite the large number of protesters that you can see in Tel Aviv, fact of the matter is polling indicates that a slight majority, in fact, favor weakening the Supreme Court. Now, this is one poll, so let me just give you that warning. But according to the Jewish People Policy Institute, which is a Jerusalem-based research group, roughly 44% of Israelis support the judicial overhaul and 41% oppose it. I should also note that Netanyahu pursued this, or the moves came after the government announced its first efforts to strengthen Israel's settlements in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. So that's in my opinion, another motivation here, because as Cenk had mentioned, the country's Supreme Court was far more fair in terms of weighing in on matters related to the West Bank and Palestinians. So this new authorization for 9 new settlements is a bit of a problem, and I think that kind of informs us as to what the real motivations are for Netanyahu. Now, on the Israeli right, the Supreme Court, again, is typically seen as a left-leaning institution that prevents right-wing and religious governments from enacting policies that they were elected to implement. Though it has broadly supported some settlement construction in the occupied territories. Cenk went over this a little bit, but understand the criticism mostly comes from Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing government because of the fact that they've been willing to step in and check some of the acts that they've engaged in. Now, about the protesters, an estimated 200,000 Israelis demonstrated across the country on Saturday, according to organizers, in one of the biggest turnouts in the weekly mass rallies happening for nearly 2 months. Israel's mainly ceremonial president also has called for compromise and warned that the crisis had left the country on the brink of constitutional and social collapse. The other thing I wanted to mention is it's having an impact on the economy, which I wouldn't have predicted, but just to give you a sense of what's happening. In recent weeks, US investors JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, as well as Britain's Barclays Bank, have issued reports warning of a rising risk of investing in Israel. Some economists have compared the situation to Poland, whose credit rating was lowered after passing legislation in 2016 restricting judicial independence. And as one professor of economics at Tel Aviv University says, what we see here with the reforms is bad for the economy. How fast the risk is going up is not yet certain, but it is rising and the people are worried.
Okay, so I want to make, I think this is a really interesting point where we get to look at 3 different issues and see a little bit of insight into it. One's about Jewish people overall, the other one's about Palestinians, and the third one's about Israel, all 3 different topics. One, there's tons of anti-Semitic theories that have resurfaced recently because of Kanye West and others, right? And Donald Trump dining with a bunch of crazy anti-Semites. So, well, they're always portrayed as a monolith, right? Oh, Jewish business interests, Jews control this or that. Well, there's all those Jews in Israel who don't agree with one another. And the business interests, by the way, inside Israel are losing. And then international business interests like JP Morgan and others are coming out against the Israeli government. Why are they doing that if the Jews control everything? So, I mean, look, these are super obvious points, but unfortunately they're not obvious to everyone. So the anti-Semitism is absurd and always ridiculous, and any look at Israel ironically shows that, okay? So number 2 is about Israel itself. Look, Netanyahu, in terms of their internal politics, is doing what all of these corrupt right-wing leaders do. I'm not worried about the Supreme Court because they're pursuing corruption charges against me. I'm worried about their corruption. Yeah, that's it. Even though my corruption is pervasive and proven and obvious, no, we need to get rid of those guys investigating me because they're the real corrupt ones, wink. And that's just exactly what Trump did with Drain the Swamp, exactly what Erdogan does during the earthquake and before. It's the same right-wing formula that everybody across the world unfortunately applies. And the last thing is, look, as far as the Palestinians are concerned, I actually view this as a really hopeful moment because unfortunately, the Palestinian cause has not animated enough of a percentage of the Israeli citizens for it to push forward a peace plan, right? But now, reformed secular Jews inside Israel are beginning to see, wait, my interests are not at all aligned with the right-wing fundamentalist zealots. They're not just coming for Palestinians, they're also coming for us. And so now that's been a phenomenon for a long time, but now it's crystal clear. And now they're on the brink of realizing they're also going to lose a lot of rights here. And so it might make for might create a tiny bit of sliver of hope that perhaps the secular side can win and they'll lead in a different direction for Israel. It's not a huge hope, but it is a little bit. And so that's a positive development here too.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the corruption relating to building codes in Turkey and how that played a role in the insane death toll that just continues to climb following a massive earthquake. That and more coming up.
Back to a social break. So guys, tomorrow is our 21st anniversary here at TYT, and we finally get to drink. So we're gonna bring on all the stars here, Anna, JR, Rashad Ritchie, Nina Turner, Michael Schur, John Idarola, Dave Cole is gonna join us too. So that's right after the main show tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern, so stay right here for that. I think you'll love it. Some of our favorite moments, some of the craziest moments in TYT history. We're gonna play some games. I think you guys will love it, so stay here for that. Okay, and you guys know Watch This is a new time. It's right before the Young Turks. That's JR's show, so make sure you're checking it out. It's our lead-in now, and you could get all the videos at youtube.com/watchlisttyt. Okay, let me go to members. Jenks Left Tricep or Fury writes in, Jenks showing off his soccer star haircut today. Not a big deal. Trying to keep it on the down low, but I appreciate you noticing. RFD Remote Dragon, fascinating, writes in, guess Israel and the Saudis got the missile defense systems and left the US hanging with the balloons. I mean, that's an interesting point, right? Israel has Iron Dome. I've always been in favor of that. I guess we don't have Iron Dome. I don't know, isn't that weird?
Yeah, we also don't have universal health care, but I'm glad that we're funding a right-wing government that brutalizes people and has the money apparently to provide universal health care for their people. Yep, it's great.
I mean, look,
I love paying my taxes. Good to know that it benefits the right things.
Certainly an argument to be made that until we get universal health care, we should not provide a dollar to any government, whether we like the government or not, whether it's right wing or left wing, if they have universal health care. Apparently they have way more money than we do. Shy Coltrane 42 says, is Israelis stealing land, killing its native inhabitants is a blatant, grotesque human rights violation. That is certainly true, unfortunately, of the settlements, and I know that the West Bank situation is getting worse, and 45 Palestinians have already died this year alone, and we're not that far into the year. And unfortunately, there is, I mean, I gave you a sliver of hope on that last story, but that's all we got, a sliver. Unfortunately, the brutal occupation will probably continue indefinitely, and no one in American government or power or media cares. And they will never do anything about it. So that's just, I'm keeping it real with you guys. Fidel Castroli writes in on Twitch, Jank was abducted by aliens and they gave him a haircut. Okay, that's a new theory, could happen, you never know. I saw a compliment here, why not? Messelin says 16 months of incredible news coverage. Thank you, TYT, you're the best. No, you're the best. We can't do it without members, we love you guys for it. Alpha Dog says, as we keep shooting down UFOs, it's beginning to feel less like Valentine's Day and more like Independence Day, the movie. We just need Will Smith punching an alien instead of slapping Chris Rock, and we're all good, okay? Non-human humanist says, oh my God, Trump was right. Space Force. Don't worry, they include a wink emoji. Left in Us is means testing for military funding? Maybe. Well, they certainly don't have the means apparently. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, more news.
All right, let's give you guys an update on the death toll in Turkey and what has exacerbated that death toll.
Structural engineers say steel reinforcement can deform to keep buildings from instantaneous collapse, but many of Turkey's structures appear to have been largely concrete, although Turkey has building codes very much in line with North American standards.
But were those building codes enforced? And that's the real question being asked, as scores of structures have collapsed following one of the strongest earthquakes in Turkey in recent years. Now, here's an explanation of Turkey's building codes, how they came about, and then I'll explain how corruption pretty much mitigates the very codes that they discuss in this video.
After the 1999 quake in northwest Turkey, which killed more than 17,000 people, investigations found many construction faults, including the use of corrosive beach sand in concrete. Turkey reacted by updating building regulations several times, most recently in 2018. But look at this image of the Turkish town of Izlahiye, particularly this white building over here. Google Street View shows it was still being constructed in 2020, the weight of the floors suspended above a large empty shop space. Now that is a difficult design to survive an earthquake. And despite the regulations, recent satellite image appear to show that it completely collapsed. The same is true for several recently constructed buildings on this street. Elsewhere, advertisements have circulated appearing to show buildings claiming to comply with regulations, buildings which collapsed. It's these kind of examples that some suggest show codes weren't tightly enforced.
And the reason why they're not tightly enforced is because there's something known as construction amnesties that provide loopholes for developers so they don't have to necessarily follow those codes. Older buildings that were built prior to the codes passing also do not have to abide by the new codes and retrofit the buildings to withstand some of these stronger earthquakes. So some of these construction amnesties are effectively legal exemptions for the payment of a fee. So if the developers just pay a little fee, then they don't have to abide by the building codes, and the structures that fell as a result of the earthquake is what has contributed to this insanely high death toll. As of this morning, the number was around 33,000. It's going to continue to climb, of course. And the Turkish justice minister said Sunday that some 131 people were under investigation for their alleged responsibility in the construction of buildings that failed to withstand the quakes. But if the loophole is baked into the system, I mean, they're gonna take advantage of the loophole, and it seems like that's what's happening here.
Yeah, there's several different problems here. And guys, this isn't just about Turkey, this is about America and all across the world. There's a reason why we have regulations, because they are rules meant to protect you. You could argue that all of our laws are regulations. Don't rob people, don't murder people, those are regulations. Hey, when you're building a building, make sure that it is earthquake proof, especially on a giant fault line, because that is the equivalent of getting those people killed if you don't. And that's exactly what happened here. So now, there are the old buildings that need to be retrofitted. Oh boy, in Turkey, that is a hell of a process, and a lot of them are not. I'll give you the numbers in a second. And then there's the new buildings that were built since the 1999 devastating earthquake that killed 18,000 people in the western part of the country, right? And overall, in 2018, the calculation, 50% of the buildings in Turkey, that is 13 million buildings, are not up to code. They will not survive earthquakes. That's half the buildings in the country, and there's two massive fault lines that Turkey's on top of, and a third one arguably as well. So when you do an exemption for a code so that you don't have to have the building be able to survive an earthquake, it won't survive an earthquake. So I don't understand how anyone could justify an exemption for any building, period, especially in Turkey, where there's fault lines everywhere, right? Absolutely unacceptable for one building, let alone the thousands and thousands of buildings they gave exemptions to. Why? Money, it's always about the money. And one more thing about that, the Turkish government has been collecting an earthquake tax since 1999 just for a situation just like this. And there's at a minimum $4.6 billion that is built up into that fund. A lot of Turks paid tons of taxes into that fund. Erdogan now says, I don't know where it is.
Of course.
I don't know.
Honestly,
yeah, by the way, I'll tell you where it is. It's in his goddamn pocket. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Him and his stupid cronies and his family. And if you say that in Turkey, by the way, you'll be arrested. So that's the kind of tyrant that Erdogan is.
In '94, when there was a pretty big earthquake in Northridge, California, they passed new building regulations related to what's referred to as dingbat apartment buildings. And they're apartment buildings where they have the carport like right underneath the very first floor of the apartments, which isn't the most secure structure in an area where you're likely to get earthquakes. And so now all of those buildings have had to be retrofitted as a result of new regulations, but there is no construction amnesty there. All landlords, mom and pop landlords, it doesn't matter. All of them had to shell out a ton of cash to retrofit their buildings, and that was the right thing to do. Those are the right regulations to ensure that people don't die when an earthquake happens and their housing collapse as a result of that quake. Now, as I mentioned, in regard to Turkey, the death toll from the 7.8 magnitude and 7.5 magnitude quakes that hit southeastern Turkey and northern Syria 9 hours apart on February 6th rose to 33,179 on Sunday and was certain to keep increasing as search teams locate more bodies in the rubble. I should note that some reports indicated that as many as 36,000 people have been reported dead. The other thing I want to mention is it's fascinating because it appears the government here is trying to deflect and place all of their blame on the developers. For instance, 12 people have been arrested already. As I mentioned, 131 people total are already under investigation for alleged responsibility in the construction of the buildings. But again, I mean, if there's a loophole, the builders are gonna take advantage of the loophole. And the fish rots from the head down. If the government has those loopholes in place, how are you gonna pretend like you are not at fault in any way, shape, or form? That's insane.
100%. In fact, right before the earthquake, the Turkish parliament was considering more building amnesties, code amnesties. Well, I mean, just like here in America, of course, the politicians are super corrupt, right? And so now they have arrested those people. Are some of them guilty? Yeah, it's entirely possible that they are, right? And did they cheat so they can make more money, not caring that 33,000 people will die because they wanted to have an extra boat and an extra car, right? Yeah, that might definitely be the case. Or by the way, they could be scapegoats. And that's the problem with corruption. Once you have a tyrant like Erdogan, you don't know what's true and what's not true. It could be that it's 12 guys he really doesn't like. It's 12 guys who are the most innocent. It's 12 guys who are part of other political factions he doesn't like. You know what this guy did? In the middle of the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, in the first 24 hours, when communication was the most important, he cut off Twitter. But people were organizing on Twitter and coordinating to rescue people. Why did he cut off Twitter? Because one journalist criticized him. And he had that guy arrested, okay? Turkey, if you're getting confused here, Turkey's supposed to be a democracy. But sometimes in a democracy, tyrants like Erdogan come in and they strangle the democracy until there's almost nothing left. It's exactly what Trump wanted to do and had started to do. And it's what Netanyahu's doing in Israel. We literally did a story about it today. The right wingers are saying all across the world. I'm gonna give you one piece of hope here in a second, but first, two more pieces of bad news. Of course, Erdogan comes in and says, oh, my opponents are politicizing the issue. Let's not politicize this. Whenever people commit political crimes, they then immediately say, don't politicize. Don't politicize. And by the way, they're the first guys to politicize things that aren't even political for their own benefit. So just a monster through and through. You know what else he said? He said, well, maybe it's fate. Oh, no, your job wasn't to protect them. Your job was to take tons and tons, billions of dollars in bribes while all those people died that were your citizens that you were supposed to protect, and afterwards you go, maybe it was fate. Okay, these guys are monsters. Okay. And the second horrible news is, if you think Turkey's in bad shape, nobody can even get to Syria. So for so long, the roads were closed. The Bashar al-Assad government is filled with monsters, and that fish rots from the head down too. So nobody can even get to rescue the poor Syrians. At least there's aid in Turkey. All right, finally the good news. Yes, you're gonna see some of those videos and they're wonderful, but remember, they're a tiny percentage of the folks being pulled out of the buildings. 6 days later, an 88-year-old woman rescued, a 6-year-old rescued, children, pregnant woman, families buried together. And this is one heartbreaking, every story's heartbreaking, but one guy survived all those days, and they said, how about the others? Because he had been hearing them throughout. He said, I stopped hearing them 3 days ago. And so they were in there. They were in there for 3 days. They could have been rescued. But by the way, Erdogan didn't want to use the military because he's not sure the military's on his side. What a terrible, terrible human being. All right, but some of the rescues were done with joint Turkish and Italian forces, joint Turkish and German forces, and also the first time the Armenian-Turkish border has been opened in 35 years, and that was so that more aid could come in. So God bless both governments for making that happen.
All right, the next story has nothing to do with international relations or international news. So why don't we take a break, and when we come back, I'll show you, I think, a perfect example of how the right wing pretends to hold corporations accountable while simultaneously ignoring the fact that they have captured our political system and made it far more corrupt and against the American people. That and more coming right up.
All right, back during the break here. Let's go to YouTube members. Machiavelli Outlaw writes in, thank you so much for your strong voices. Well, you're a member, you are our voice, and if we're lucky and honored enough to be your voice, it's only because you allow that to happen. So thank you, appreciate it. Michael Gonzalez says, TYT is officially too old for Matt Gaetz to date. Okay, that's funny. Stone to the Bone Dragon says, all the building contractors have already received all their profits from defrauding. Yes, that is definitely true. By the way, they caught a couple of the contractors at the border trying to leave the country. Those guys likely guilty. One of them said, well, only a couple of my buildings fell. Sounds like a classy guy. Deb HNYC writes in, I can't find any amusement over this stupid balloon story because of the suffering that's going on in East Palestine, Ohio. That's how I learned it's pronounced. Where the hell is the administration? Deb, I'll tell you where they are, right comfortably in the pockets of the railroad companies and all other companies. Buttigieg is just doing nothing. Maybe we'll cover this tomorrow. Right now, both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rashida Tlaib saying, hey, maybe we should do something about this. And Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden going, no, not our beloved companies. We can't ask them to put modern brakes in their trains. The Lever's doing great reporting on this. David Strode and others, so check them out on it. If Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rashida Tlaib got together and actually pressured the administration to do the right thing, that would be the most amazing story. And by the way, are you guys real populists? Are you? I don't know. And do you have a pulse? Let's find out. I wish, but they're not going to get together. Marjorie Taylor Greene's full of crap. And progressives generally, when the media yells at them, will go, okay, well, we love Pete Buttigieg, we love Joe Biden. Hey, prove me wrong. Can't wait to see it. Puff the Dragon says, you can oppose the Israeli government and not be anti-Semitic. Those two things are not the same thing. Of course that's true, of course. It's not anti-American to criticize the American government, etc. Pitchfork's Dragon says, lots of nations have international weather balloons. They've been flying over our heads our whole lives. Thanks 2023 for the lamest epiphany ever. By the way, more nonsense politics. The Biden guys are like, oh yeah, we spotted the balloons. Trump couldn't even spot the balloons. Oh, shut up. So Jason Ray says, so apparently the Federalist Society is in Israel. Exact same talking points the right here used to pack the court for the last few decades. The right wing is the same everywhere. Absolutely. Jason also wrote in, Cenk, let's be honest, every gun maker has been given exemptions from the deaths their products cause, and it only costs them the bribes they pay Congress. 100% correct. You could easy to say that Turkey's doing it wrong. How about America? World's worst corruption. They let these companies kill their citizens nonstop. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, more news.
All right, let's do it.
A new report revealing how woke corporate America has become. The 1792 exchange studying the policies and practices of more than 1,000 companies, ranking the likelihood of the management taking action if employees have a different point of view.
While corporate capture of America's political system and rampant corruption is routinely ignored by Fox News, here's an example of how they pretend to hold corporate interests accountable, whining about pro-wokeism. Let's watch.
50% of companies were rated low risk, meaning little chance of them prioritizing ideology, but 30% were found medium risk, and even more alarming, 12% were rated high risk.
They're literally reporting on a study that somehow measured the wokeness of various companies. And what's really in question here, what they're really talking about, because I think it's important to understand the context, is this whole investment category for retail investors known as the environmental, social, and governance investments. So essentially, for people who have somewhat of a conscience and they don't want to just invest in companies that are doing harm to the planet or have certain, workplace standards that they don't agree with, there's like a category of companies that have some guidelines when it comes to their environmental impact, their social impact, and all of that. And so the environmental, social, and governance, or ESG investing, refers to a set of standards for a company's behavior used by socially conscious investors to screen potential investments. That's it, that's all it is, that's all it is. To give people options when they want to invest in the stock market in their minds, the most moral way they possibly can. Environmental criteria consider how a company safeguards the environment, including corporate policies addressing climate change, for example. Social criteria examine how it manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and the communities where it operates. Governance deals with the company's leadership, executive pay, audits, internal controls, and shareholder rights. Many mutual funds, brokerage firms, and robo-advisors now offer investment products that employ ESG principles. But look, Fox News and the conservative right, for some reason, doesn't want retail investors to be equipped with this information about various companies. Because knowledge about which company you want to invest in is somehow too woke. And so that's what the right wing is using as their example, as their theater, right? To hold corporations accountable. It's not about the endless legalized bribery, the corporate capture that we see in Congress. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with terrible treatment of workers, the insane amount that they've invested in corporate stock buybacks instead of investing in their own companies. I mean, the list goes on and on. Fox News has no problem with that. Conservatives, no problem with that. They just have a problem with them being too woke, apparently.
Okay, so let me explain why companies are woke and why the right wing hates it. So there's two different reasons, two different kinds of companies. One is companies value diversity. Why do they value diversity? Number one, studies have shown that it makes for a more profitable company. And right wing goes, I hate capitalism. I don't want, why are you trying to be profitable? That's because that's their purpose. And so they're like, well, we don't like it that diversity works. Well, that's a goddamn sad day for you. But that's the smaller point. The larger point in that category is their customers are diverse. Coke, let's take them as an example, wants to sell Coca-Cola to black people, gay people, Muslim people, white people, Christian people, every kind of people, because that's their job. They're like, why don't you hate black people like we do? Oh, you're supporting Black Lives Matter? Well, I don't want them to matter. Well, go cry about it. I don't know. What do you want? What do you want them to do? Not have less customers? Why do you hate capitalism this much? And that's because their hatred is overwhelming them. They just live in the darkness. And so if you don't hate the same people they hate, oh, you're woke. You're woke. Go back to sleep like we are. Okay, morons. Whatever. So then the second kind of types of companies are like Aspiration. And they were a sponsor of ours. And what do? They try to make companies net zero. So they do deals with other companies and try to get them to carbon neutrality. Now, wait a minute, that's saving the planet. And it's between two different companies. And one of them helps them to get to protect their environment. The other company says, I'm gonna pay you money to protect their environment. Why do you care, Fox News? Why is that your business? That's a transaction between the two of them. They wanna do good in the world. I'll tell you why they care. Because that hurts the oil companies. Because if you become carbon neutral, you rely less on oil. And they're like, oil companies must be helped at the expense of the planet. Because that's the greed of the right wing to support, ironically, giant corporations. But as long as they're doing evil in the world.
So Rachel Campos Duffy, the host that you see on Fox News, spoke to Paul Fitzpatrick, who's with the 1792 exchange. They're the ones who did this goofy study on so-called woke companies. And so he kind of breaks down their findings in this next clip. Let's watch.
ESG is a set of principles that are ill-defined, which is really the answer. Environmental, social, and governance principles that activists can use to fill and weaponize corporations. They can cancel customers, as we've heard and you talked about, can deny service. They can choke off funding based on these principles, and they're rating companies based on whatever the political position of the day is.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. It feels like a Chinese social credit score of sorts.
What are these people talking about? What are they, like literally, like Fitzpatrick did a study on what? Because what he's saying literally makes no sense. ESG is just an umbrella of companies that, I will admit, vaguely make promises that seem good to libs who are looking to invest their money. What happened to the invisible hand of the market, right? If you offer a good product, or if consumers like your product, they invest in it, they buy your product. What they're trying to do here is essentially do away with any information that could inform retail investors about whether or not a particular or potential investment goes along with their morality. Yeah. That's all this is about. That's literally all this is about. And let me just be clear about something, okay? The corporations, again, engage in like these vague promises that at the end of the day mean nothing, okay? The only real goal these companies have, all companies, all corporations, is to maximize profit and to return on investment for their shareholders. That's it. That is their goal. That is their fiduciary responsibility. That is it. And look, I think, Cenk, you're reading into it too much. The right wing notices, smartly by the way, that there is a rise in economic populism among the electorate. They don't want to be left out of the conversation. They want to posture as if, oh no, we hate corporations too. Just like Dennis Prager said when I was debating him on this show. Oh, I hate corporations. They're too woke. That's the angle that they're coming at. No, it ain't because they're too woke. It's because they underpay their workers. It's because they don't invest money into their companies and do corporate stock buybacks instead, essentially turning the stock market into a massive house of cards because it's not in any way tied to productivity or revenue. It's just dependent on how much money executives are funneling into their shares. I mean, like the list goes on and on and on. They have no problem with that. That's been going on forever. Corporate capture of Congress. They have no problem with the legalized bribery. They just want to pretend like they too have issues with corporate America, but they don't want to touch the profit motives.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
100%. I think it's both of what we're saying. But we're gonna get you the real problems with corporations in a second, and what Fox News will never ever share with you, because as Anna points out, it's actually their beloved corporations that they're trying to protect. This is all a smokescreen. But first I want to talk about the moron that Rachel Campos Duffy is, okay? She said, this sounds really scary. Some companies are trying to help the planet and other human beings, that sounds scary. Why are they helping? I don't like the help, sounds Chinese. You idiot, it's capitalism. If you're implying that it's communist, as in the Chinese Communist Party, as the right wing always say, It's literally the exact opposite. But you don't need a single brain cell to work at Fox News. So now let's show you what the real problem is.
So actually, before we do that, Fitzpatrick does have advice for anyone who's just as worked up as he and Rachel Campos Duffy are about these ESG companies. He says that you should demand to speak to the manager. Let's watch.
The problem is we need to change our behavior. We recommend that folks go onto our database, 1792exchange.com, find the companies that they patronize, print off the report, walk into the office, the local branch, and if it's a high-risk company, ask politely to calmly speak with the manager and say, why are you doing this? Are you going to cancel me? And if you're a business or a nonprofit, ask to have the terms of your agreement changed. If it's a low-risk company, go into that office, thank them, encourage your friends to shop there.
Terms of what agreement? Like, what is this guy talking about?
No, these guys are all maniacs.
Insane.
Okay,
but go to their website and then go ask to speak to some managers. I'm sure it'll work out real well for you.
They're training, in a best case scenario, they're training a generation of Karens, right?
Yeah.
Who'd like to speak to the manager. And in a worst case scenario, they're weaponizing all these people to go attack these companies. Now, he said to do it politely, just to be fair. It's like the first time I've ever seen a right winger say, do it politely. But I will say this is very important. When he says, ask them, are you going to cancel me?
What does that even mean?
What lunatic raving thing are you saying? I don't know what you're saying. Speak English. Are you going to cancel me for what? Which company is going to cancel you and not make money from you? You morons, okay? But you see that, but their audience doesn't know. They're taking advantage of these poor folks. So they're gonna go print out things and they're gonna go into like Kentucky Fried Chicken and be like, are you gonna cancel me? And people are gonna be like, what the hell are you talking about?
I just hope someone films it as it's happening.
Oh, it's just gonna happen all over the country.
It's gonna be amusing. It's not gonna happen all over the country because they don't even explain what they're really talking about here. They're just like making this vague critique of companies being woke, but they don't explain what, again, what this whole umbrella of socially conscious companies are about, why they're doing what they're doing, and how this is, again, really just about retail investors looking for a way to morally invest their money. It's just so incredibly stupid. Now let's talk about the real issue with corporations and the system of legalized bribery we have in this country, which makes their voices much more important than ours, okay? So let's go to, give me 1 second. Okay, so let's talk about corruption as it pertains to the fossil fuel industry, since they love talking about the environment and all of that and how it's BS, it's too woke to be concerned about that. The Environmental and Energy Study Institute reported that direct subsidies to the fossil fuel industry totaled $20 billion per year, with 80% going toward oil and gas. In addition, from 2019 to 2023, tax subsidies are expected to reduce federal revenue by around $11.5 billion. I start with that data point because how exactly did the fossil fuel industry get such preferential treatment here in the United States? Could it have something to do with, I don't know, the insane amount of lobbying they engage in? The top oil and gas companies spent more than $12.4 million on lobbying in just the first quarter of 2022. In just 3 months of 2022, about 1 million more than they spent by this time last year, that time a year prior, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine upends the global energy market. Let's take a look at this fun graph that shows you the top players when it comes to lobbying in oil and gas. Of course, Koch Industries, $3.3 million in the first quarter of 2022 alone. You have Occidental Petroleum, $2.8 million in the first quarter of 2022 alone. But maybe I'm too focused on one point in time, Cenk. It's only 3 months. Maybe it was just like a big spike in those 3 months and then everything leveled off, except it didn't. Total lobbying in 2022 by the fossil fuel companies totaled, get a load of this, 122,873,864. Think about that. Over nearly $123 million in oil and gas lobbying in just 1 year alone.
Yeah, guys, so they spent $123 million. This is a lot to invest if you're a company, right? But what do they get back? We just showed you. Just take the oil and gas companies. So 80% of 20 billion is $16 billion. 23 million, and then you get 16 billion back. I did the math on that. That's an awesome investment. If you had a product where you spend only 123 million and you get 16 billion back, that'd be the world's greatest product. And that's exactly what corruption is in America. It's the world's greatest product for these companies. And so they buy off all these politicians, yes, definitely Democrats as well as Republicans.
Oh, I mean, I could show you a perfect graph. Let's go to graphic 9 here, because the top recipient of fossil fuel money in 2022 was a Democrat, Senator Joe Manchin.
Of course.
To the tune of $763,559 that we know of, because I'm sure there was some dark money.
Oh, there's tons of dark money. That's the tip of the iceberg. And of course, number 2 was the leader of the Republicans in the House, Kevin McCarthy, right? So this is, by the way, what does the press call them? Bipartisan, moderates, moderate Joe Manchin. Okay, hey, I don't want progressives or anyone on the left calling Fox News. If you're a right winger though, why don't you call Fox News? They like having people call people, right? Or go to their office. By the way, do not do anything physical, okay? But ask them, if you're right wingers, ask them, hey, how come you guys never cover corruption? Like the #1 issue back in 2016 was drain the swamp. But you guys never ever talk about the obvious bribes that all these politicians take. I mean, every once in a while you'll make an oblique reference to George Soros, but there's all charts and charts of companies giving hundreds of millions of dollars to corrupt politicians, including Democrats. Why don't you, I mean, okay, let's say you're Fox News, you're biased, you wanna hide the fact that Republicans are the most corrupt people on earth, the Republican politicians. You just wanna hit the Democrats. Why don't you hit Democrats on corruption? Isn't that super weird?
Please do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
If you're a right winger, I'm asking you, why doesn't Fox News hit the Democrats on corruption? These are obvious bribes. Oh, right, because the whole point is to distract you and cover up the corruption, because they're actually a giant multi-billion-dollar corporation like the rest of them.
Well, we have more on corruption in a different story, this time with the cloak of diversity to kind of distract Americans from what's really going on. Last month, 11 sitting members of Congress attended a gala called the Diversity Across the Aisle Gala. Now that sounds great, except for the fact that the event wasn't really about diversity, it was more about lobbying. In fact, Diversity Across the Aisle was hosted by a lobbying group known as Ferox Strategy, which often uses identity politics to essentially serve as like a smokescreen to hide its true purpose, which is funneling money to corporations. Now, Ferox Strategies claims to support diversity, but let's show you who they really represent, because this graphic will show you who their clients are. It's from their website, and notice there are pharmaceutical companies like Viatris and Eli Lilly represented there. You also have the Gap, Walt Disney Company, and so those are their clients. Those are the people they serve. So why are we pretending like this meeting was about diversity when in reality it was about lobbying on behalf of their clients? Now, in terms of who went to this event, you have a long list of Democratic lawmakers, including Representative Nanette Diaz-Barragán. You also have Representative Tony Cardenas, Representative Joaquin Castro, Yvette Clarke, Robert Garcia, Jimmy Gomez, Robert Menendez, the list goes on. Now, congressional staffers also attended the event. In one paragraph from the event, Irene Bueno, a lobbyist for Pfizer and Comcast, huddles with staffers to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Representative Doris Matsui, a Democrat from California, and Senator Brian Schatz, Democrat from Hawaii. In another picture, Tiffany Williams, a vice president for the Daschle Group, named after former Republican Senator Tom Daschle, along with Lisa Fang of Alexion Pharmaceuticals, both grin alongside a large group of other congressional staff members to senior Democratic lawmakers. And again, the Daschle Group is in fact a lobbying group led by former Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle. Cenk.
All right, so this is classic Democratic corruption, where they go, no, it's okay. It's minorities doing it, so this is good. This is positive. Now, you know, the right wing uses woke as a negative thing, like, oh, can you believe people care about diversity and humans being equal to one another, right? But the left, not the left wing, but the left as in the Democrats, use like woke politics as a cover story to not be woke at all.
100%.
Okay, to actually 100% do corruption while pretending that they care about minorities.
100%. This happens all the time. In addition to that, the other thing they do is weaponize identity, right? Elizabeth Warren did it during the Democratic primaries when she was running against Bernie Sanders, and she pretended like Bernie Sanders had said something stupid and sexist to her about how a woman could never win president when he was the one who was encouraging her to run for president in the first place. I see it happen with Democrats all the time. I see it happen in a workplace context where they weaponize identity in order to basically move up the economic ladder or get promotions within the given company. I see it all over the place, and it's pretty freaking self-serving and disgusting.
Okay, so to give you a sense of how bad this is, so they're going to do a swearing-in ceremony for 9 members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus at a nightclub. All right, already this is super weird, right? And they've invited a bunch of diverse legislators to it. And what did Biden call him? The HHS Secretary Javier Baccaria was there to do the swearing in. So he's about to do the swearing in and he gets interrupted by a lobbyist because the lobbyist paid for the party, right? They're at a lobbyist party to get sworn into Congress. I mean, that is so fitting, okay? And the lobbyist goes, oh, hey, Cabinet Secretary, shut up for a second. It's time to do plugs, okay? They just pay the bills. So Marco Davis, the president of CHCI, who only represents JP Morgan, Chase, MasterCard, ExxonMobil, Apple, Airbnb, DaVita, Toyota, Reynolds America, Microsoft, New York Life Insurance, among other interests, steps in and says, to be very honest with you, General Motors and I are personally extremely committed to diversity in the public policy profession. Okay, now are they gonna ask you to vote with General Motors and give them subsidies and all sorts of other goodies? Of course! Do they give a damn whether you're Hispanic or black or white or anything else? They don't care at all. Okay, and all these guys get paid by them.
Yep.
And then by the way, when you criticize the lobbyists, they just pick a random ethnic group. They're like, oh, in this story, oh, Hispanics are so offended. Well, really, did you poll them? I bet you if you polled them, they'd be way more offended at what you're doing than us pointing it out.
No, but Cenk,
No, I found an elite Hispanic. And they represent all Hispanics, and they have taken tons of money from General Motors and all those companies that I've told you about, and they are here to say you are racist, okay? Are you actually? No, it doesn't matter. You're pointing at corruption, so we're gonna bury you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but corruption just feels better when it's being done by a diverse group of people.
Oh yeah,
right?
When it's someone from my ethnic group, then I don't mind it at all. I mean, that's absurd. No actual human being thinks that. But in Washington, they repeat it as if it's just the most obvious thing in the world. And so they use, look guys, it's ironically a Fox News tactic. You know how Fox News will bring on someone black to criticize black people. And all right-wing media does it. Here's Candace Owens to tell you how awful black culture is, right? And so in this case, they bring in corrupt Democrats from the different variety of cultures, and they come and tell you how great corruption is. No, it's okay, black people are in favor of corruption. Latinos are in favor of corruption. Are they? Are they? I think you're making that up. And you just got a couple of figureheads to just charge everyone who actually talks about corruption with racism and pretend that you're on the people's side. And by the way, I don't give a damn what anybody in Washington says. Go ahead, say blah, 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 whatever the hell you want. All of you are corrupt.
Okay, finally, for obvious reasons, since the story focused on a specific event where Democrats were in attendance, I don't want you to think that this is a partisan issue, because the same company, Ferox Strategies, has done similar events with Republicans, and they have lobbied for awful, I would say awful policies that people concerned with diversity would not be in favor of. In 2019, for instance, The Intercept reported on hacked emails from a surveillance company called Perceptix. The emails showed how Ferox Strategy had worked with tough on immigration Republican lawmakers to insert provisions into legislation that would have enabled its client to win contracts for reading the license plates of vehicles crossing the US-Mexico border. I feel the love and diversity already. Isn't it so great?
Oh yeah. Okay, I've got two last ones for you. Let's stick with FedEx for a second. They had a message that said, FedEx clients Walmart, Alexion, and Waste Management joined a who's who of corporate sponsors to generously celebrate the most diverse Congress ever. Look at how generous they are. Are they generous to Latinos and everybody else? No. They're just generous to the politicians who represent them while taking tons of cash from these guys to do the exact opposite. And finally, remember the guy who interrupted the HHS secretary, Health and Human Services secretary, and the swearing in? So that was Vargas. Lobbying disclosures show that Vargas has focused on influencing Congress on tax credits, emission standards, and recycling issues, among other policies important to GM's bottom line. The company did not disclose any lobbying on issues related to diversity.
Oh, wow, what a surprise.
Turns out diversity was a cover story for doing more corruption. And this party was not a swearing-in ceremony. It was a place where they handed out bribes. So, and by the way, of course, presiding over all of this was Hakeem Jeffries, who we're all supposed to respect and bow down to. And so that's what the mainstream media will tell you. I'm going to tell you the truth. They're all crooks.
All right, when we come back for the second hour of the show, we'll talk about how Trump paid quite a bit of money to look into voter fraud in 2020. He didn't like the results and he suppressed them. You don't want to miss that story. We've got that and more coming up in the second hour of the show.
Can't let that happen.
The concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion, that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
It's like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong. We start a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow.
And then best fighters of the country are right here on this panel with the obvious
This is where it started in a lot of ways.
Why is he lying? Because these are acts that you can commit with impunity.
Most of us are usually in boxer shorts underneath.
I went with the pants today.
This is the first ever power panel with Donald Trump as president.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
We have to stop pretending that race is not an issue in this country.
Now keep in mind, racism had gone away until Barack Obama brought it back.
That's right.
They want to protect life so much that they want to ensure that insurance companies don't cover your maternity care.
There is so much heinous news out there. That's why we've got to laugh, not to cry. So join me, Francesca Fiorentini, and some of my progressive friends, comedians, actors, experts, and activists as we deliver an hour of laughter and analysis every week on my podcast, The Bitchuation Room. The Bitchuation Room is an invitation for all of us to take ourselves a little bit less seriously while still giving you some concrete ideas for action. New episodes are available every single week, so join the Frantifa and listen to The Bitchuation Room on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your TYT network podcasts. And make sure to subscribe and give the show 5 stars, because I like stars.
USA, USA, USA.
All right, back on TYT, Jenk, Anna, and Nurse Khadija, change agent. So they just became a member. We appreciate it. Hit the join button below the video on YouTube. You can do likewise, or tyt.com/join. You help to make change possible. Anna.
All right, well, we're just learning now about something Trump did back in 2020 that's fascinating and a little bit hilarious. So in 2020, the Trump campaign apparently commissioned research, or a research firm, to try to prove that there was widespread election fraud in specific states that essentially stole the election from Trump and awarded it to Biden. Now, turns out that the study, the look into potential voter fraud, didn't turn up the results that Trump was looking for. And so he tried to suppress the results, which is why we're now hearing about it today. Now, the campaign paid researchers from Berkeley Research Group to study 2020 election results in 6 states, looking for fraud and irregularities to highlight in public and in the courts. Among the areas examined were voter machine malfunctions, instances of dead people voting, and any evidence that could help Trump show that he actually won. None of the findings were presented to the public or in court. And the reason why they were never presented to the public is because Trump didn't like the results. He spent $600,000 to have this study done. And about a dozen people at the firm worked on the report, including econometricians who use statistics to model and predict outcomes. And the states that they specifically looked at were Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. Now, one person who was familiar with the work said this: they looked at everything: change of addresses, illegal immigrants, ballot harvesting, people voting twice, machines being tampered with, ballots that were sent to vacant addresses that were returned and voted, literally anything you could think of. Voter turnout anomalies, date of birth anomalies, whether dead people voted. If there was anything under the sun that could be thought of, they looked at it. But what they found was there wasn't actually widespread voter fraud, not even close. While the researchers believe there were voting anomalies and unusual data patterns in a few states, along with some instances in which laws may have been skirted, they did not believe the anomalies were significant enough to make a difference in who won the election. And apparently when they were reciting the findings of their report to Trump, he lost it. The call became incredibly combative because he just, look, Berkeley Research Group didn't realize what Trump hired them for. He didn't hire them for a fair investigation and look into what transpired during the election. He hired them and paid them $600,000 so they could serve as his mouthpiece without any evidence, without any proof, just say that the election was stolen from Trump. That's what he paid them for. They just didn't realize it.
Yeah, so $600,000, by the way, is $600,000 more than he gave to the Republican candidates in the Georgia runoffs. So part of the reason he said that he raised the money was, oh, I'm gonna help other Republicans. Didn't do it at all. So I tell you that because to him, remember, he's a total liar. The idea that he's a billionaire is a joke. $600,000 is a lot of money to him. So he's like, and he's never understood the concept of, like, for example, the attorney general doesn't work for you. They work for the United States of America. You happen to just hire him for that position, but he's not your personal lawyer. The moron has literally never understood that, doesn't understand it to this day. So when he hires somebody for $600,000, he thinks, okay, your job is to lie for me. And they're like, no, our job, wait, that's not in the job description. The job description is we're supposed to investigate all these things. We did. And by the way, we found some anomalies, the ones that Anna's referring to. Now, here's the part that really set them off. They're like, as it turns out, the anomalies were on both sides.
Let me give you an exact quote that was reported in the Washington Post. None of these were significant enough, referring to the anomalies. Just like any election, there are always errors, omissions, and irregularities. It was nowhere close enough to what they wanted to prove, and it actually went in both directions.
Oops.
I guess very inconvenient for Mr. Trump. Sorry.
Yeah, there's another important fact here. By the way, of course, I want to remind you guys every time, dozens of judges, including judges appointed by Republicans and Donald Trump himself, they all looked at the cases that Trump brought, the evidence that they brought forward, and all said nonsense. You have no evidence that these elections were tampered with, there was significant fraud, or that any result would have changed at all, okay? So, but I know Republicans don't care about facts, so let's move on. The other relevant and interesting data point here is this was done before January 6th. So before he gave that speech, before he sent out the tweets, before he egged everybody on to go to the Capitol and to do all those things, before he wouldn't, when he said on January 6th to his chief of staff that he didn't mind that they were threatening to execute Mike Pence. He knew already, he had this report, there definitely wasn't fraud. There's definitely not enough to overturn the election. There's no evidence, and whatever evidence exists, it's small and on both sides. And he's like, I don't care. I'm gonna pretend it was stolen anyway. The biggest crook in American history.
It's just so pathetic. All right, well, let's move on to a fun Trump story, because this is where he really does shine.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so Donald Trump is A/B testing new nicknames for Ron DeSantis, and it is hilarious. It's the best thing happening in the news today. So Ron DeSanctimonious isn't playing so well. You know, maybe it's a little too clever. Usually the nicknames and the insults that Trump uses that tend to be effective are more juvenile than Ron DeSanctimonious.
Yeah, and by the way, we know for a fact that it was Roger Stone who came up with that and not Donald Trump. And I could tell instantly that it wasn't Trump. Look, if you ask Trump what does sanctimonious mean right now, after he's been using it for over a month, there's no way he knows it. Okay, so that's why he's looking for a new nickname. And to be fair to Trump, he's right. It's a terrible nickname, and it's MAGA is not gonna know it either. They don't even know what they're criticizing him for, and it's a mouthful, which leads us to the new nicknames.
Let's go to graphic 2 here. He has insulted DeSantis in casual conversations, describing him as, this is amazing, Meatball Ron.
That's hilarious.
An apparent dig at his appearance, or shut down Ron, a reference to restrictions the governor put in place at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, which, by the way, literally every elected lawmaker put into place in the beginning phases of the pandemic.
Are you kidding me? Trump's been bragging about how he did the vaccine and saved millions of lives, and and you mentioned A/B testing, that's trial and error, right?
Yeah.
So he's been trying it in front of audiences and they start booing him. It's the only thing I've ever seen MAGA boo him for. So now he's turning around and saying, vaccine, what do you mean? God damn DeSantis, he shut things down. He took the coronavirus seriously for like a minute. Can you believe it? A boo. Turn right around, because he's a con man. He's a natural born con man.
He is. Now, it seems as though the Meatball Ron insult has already taken off. So
I knew it, didn't I tell you this morning?
No, but it's great, it's good. Meatball Ron is good. I don't know if Ron DeSantis is Italian, right?
Oh, with a name like DeSantis?
Yeah, sounds Italian, I don't know.
So does it have like racial overtones against Italians? Of course. We kid around about it because
everybody loves Italians though, come on.
Yeah, everybody loves Italians. Nobody's racist against Italians. Leave it to Trump to be like weirdly, like at least like have a racist nickname towards Italians. But that's, to be fair to him, It's pretty multicultural. He's open-minded. Now he's insulting everyone. But anyway, it's not serious because Italians are not persecuted in this country.
Also, now once you see it, you can't unsee it. Ron DeSantis does kind of look like a meatball.
I told you.
Okay, so like let's do it. Let's do it. I mean, we got to provide the evidence. You know, we would never steer you in the wrong direction. So here's a side-by-side featuring Ron DeSantis and meatballs. Those look like they might be pork meatballs, not entirely sure, but nonetheless, there is an uncanny resemblance here.
Look, guys, there's
spaghetti and DeSantis meatballs, anyone? The Sant balls? I don't know.
Oh, wow, that sounds awful. That sounds even worse than his nickname.
And Trump supporters seem to love it. So Laura Loomer is already using this, posting imagery of Ron DeSantis sitting on a giant meatball. I mean, in a world where, and in a country where you can't really rely on politicians to do anything to represent your best interests, let's take solace in the juvenile games that are being played within the Republican Party.
Yes. So at first I thought, okay, so it's an anti-Italian thing, and plus I guess he's saying he's pudgy or something, right?
I mean, Trump isn't exactly a supermodel. I mean, not to make him feel bad about the rotund nature of his body, but like, come on, bro.
Okay,
we've all seen you play golf. Like, let's just keep it real.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about chubby, I mean, Trump is way bigger than DeSantis is, okay? And you've seen that golf picture. And so I guess he'd be Dumpling Don.
Dumpling sounds cute. You can't do it.
No, well, I don't know. Dump though sounds about right.
Oh my God.
Okay, Trumpling, dumpling, I don't know. Anyways, but then looking at DeSantis's head, once you see that DeSantis's head kind of looks like a meatball, you can't unsee it. And so this is gonna be super effective.
No, 100%. By the way, it has just been confirmed. We've just fact checked this. Ron DeSantis is in fact Italian. So given that information, there's definitely a weird insult toward Italians there, which I mean, I guess you're right. I mean, Donald Trump likes to attack everyone. Doesn't matter what your background is, he'll go after you. But like, what's amazing about this is how it seems to be working, right? Like at first there was this negative reaction to Trump attacking Ron DeSantis, but now that I think the electorate has seen how DeSantis responds to Trump's insults. Remember, they like strongmen.
No, yeah.
Right? And Ron DeSantis is doing this when he goes low, I go high strategy.
You're gonna get mauled doing that.
Yeah, it does appear that it's working against him at this point.
No, Trump's winning. He's back to the favorite for sure. So there's a couple of reasons why. First, MAGA loves to have fun. And this is fun.
They
and
love dunking on
DeSantis
people.
is a wet blanket. DeSantis had he was doing high level trolling, right? Oh, I hate critical race theory, and we're gonna make sure nobody can say the word gay and all this stuff, right? And they're like, oh, that's good. They like that, right? But it wasn't fun, right? Here, meatball Ron. It was like, let's put DeSantis on top of a meatball. Let's make his head a meatball. He's activating the trolls, right? And so now we got a tug of war between right-wing media and their audience. Because right-wing media is pushing DeSantis super hard, right?
So hard, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, this is a little unbecoming of Trump. Oh, all of a sudden you think it's unbecoming? All of a sudden.
I'm very curious, if Trump starts attacking Ron DeSantis from the perspective of, you're just copying everything that I did, that my supporters love. If he starts calling him bootleg Don, I think that might actually be even more effective. Because really, I mean, when you think about it, he is right in that he built Ron DeSantis.
Oh, that's definitely true, yeah.
Right? He's the one who endorsed Ron DeSantis for governor in Florida. Ron DeSantis put out that incredibly embarrassing ad where he's like, oh, I love Donald Trump. I read Donald Trump books to my kids at night. Like that incredibly embarrassing video. Trump can use that to his advantage. And so why, if I were Trump, I'd say, why would you want counterfeit Trump when you can have the real deal?
Yeah, for sure, and that'll work. So look, now reports are that DeSantis might announce sometime in May or June. He ain't gonna make it to May, man.
We'll see.
I mean, if this if Trump keeps bludgeoning him between now and May, that meatball is going to be off the plate by the time it gets to May, because the tug of war between the audience and the media works this way. Media goes, okay, I'm going to do brainwashing. Okay, right wingers, you now love DeSantis. You don't like Trump as much anymore. He's embarrassing. He loses elections, right? And they're like, oh, okay, maybe. And then Trump goes, meatball Ron. They're like, I like meatball Ron. No, I'm turning away from you guys. They're like, okay, don't turn away. And that's how the tug of war goes. And eventually, the audience will win. And I'd be shocked if they didn't pick Trump over this. And guys, remember, Trump is the Messiah to them. So like you're asking him to pick an apostle over Jesus, okay?
Can't do that, can't let that happen.
Indeed.
Okay, finally, we can't let this story end without reminding you of Trump's greatest hits. Without further ado.
Lion Ted, Little Marco, Crooked Hillary, Pocahontas, Sleepy Joe and Crazy Bernie, Mini Mike, Beautiful Ted, Ron DeSanctimonious.
You know, Crazy Bernie never stuck because people like Bernie.
Yeah, for sure. And DeSanctimonious is a stick because they don't know what it means. All right, my last thing is why we don't mind having fun with this Italian thing. Guys, I have personal experience because for most of my life, people thought I was Italian, okay? So I didn't get anti-Muslim discrimination until way later, until the right wing turned full-blown racist, bigoted, etc. And they're like, oh, you're brown and we hate you, right? But earlier in my life, especially in New Jersey growing up, any pizza shop I walked into, the paisan! And anytime anybody thought I was Italian, they're like, right? Whether they were Italian or not. People love Italians, right?
Yeah, but look, it's a little bit unfair. I'm not Italian, you're not Italian. I really think that it's important for us to do a wellness check on John Iadarola and make sure he's okay today, given the anti-Italian discrimination that we're hearing from Trump.
And by the way, I mean, who am I to criticize Trump on this one? He calls him Meatball Ron, and I call John Johnny Pie.
Think about it, parallels.
And by the way, we didn't even mean pizza pie, okay? But now you begin to wonder.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl, I guess, and some of the ads. AOC thinks one of them was fascist. We might disagree. That and more coming right up.
My.
Let's go to YouTube Super Chat. Tabitha writes in, Anna, Ron the meatballs, spaghetti and the meatballs. Okay, Amanda Demo writes in, Trumpty Dumpty. That's not so bad. It rhymes, it's got dump in it, okay?
Oh my God.
Can't let that happen.
Well, you might though, you might. Brad Vertigan writes in, I realize why I like TYT so much. TYT expects better of the world and its people, whereas the mainstream media is resigned to the world the way that it is. Brad, that's a great description. So number one, thank you for saying that. Number two, I think you kind of nailed it. In fact, the mainstream media will often yell at us like, oh, don't you know this is the way the world is?
They don't yell at us, Jake. Like you shadow box the media. It's like the weirdest, they don't yell at us. No one in the media yells at us. Let's just make that clear, okay?
No.
We have issues with the media. They're not constantly yelling at us.
No. Okay, you have a slightly different experience than I do because I have been to Washington many, many times. And I don't know about yelling, but yes, they have said things like that to me. So I'm not making it up, okay? It's actually happened. So Graveyard Murmur says, I think Trump should use Rhino Ron. Hassan suggested Rhonda. Imagine Trump like Rhonda. He's a woman, folks. Look at his go-go boots, very sad. His audience would love that. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get to, like, Italians, it's okay. Everybody loves Italians. I don't want to give Trump ideas that are more sexist and bigoted and racist, etc. Nadine says Dr. Ritchie has the ultimate nickname, Ron DeSatan. Okay, but
that's a selling point.
Yeah, that might actually work for Republicans. Like, oh, really? Who's he roasting over an open fire? That sounds pretty good. Danbert No Bacon writes in, call it the Coke math, invest the chump change of millions to make billions in return. That's exactly what Coke Industries does. That's what all the lobbyists do. I look in my upcoming book, Justice is Coming. I have a section on the Adelson primary and all the laundry list of things he demanded in return for the hundreds of millions of dollars that he gave to Trump and the Republican Party. He got them all. And they were worth billions of dollars. Open corruption, but not a reporter to be found. Now let's go to, I gotta tell you guys about Big Rick Energy. That's after the show. Old School's later tonight, 7 o'clock, and Ground News, okay? So there's conflicting news stories everywhere, but now Ground News is your one-stop destination for fair and unbiased news coverage. With their app and website, you can see how breaking news is covered by publications from all across the political spectrum. Plus, you can check the ownership and factuality of each source to make informed decisions about what you read. So make sure you're checking it out. Ground.news/TYT, ground.news/TYT. We'll be back. Back on TYT Janganana with you guys. And also, William Zaragoza gifted 1 Young Turks memberships. Thank you, William. Love that you're looking out for everybody. All right, Casper.
Let's now turn to our one and only Super Bowl related story. You may have seen that commercial promoting Jesus during the Super Bowl over the weekend, of course. The people behind it, He Gets Us, Jesus ads are the Christian group that, well, we'll get into them in just a moment and tell you about their tight relationship with pretty intolerant and bigoted people. But before we do, here is the commercial itself portraying something pretty different from the bigoted stuff that we'll discuss later. So if you watch those ads like in a vacuum, not knowing anything about the organization behind them or the kinds of policies they have promoted, it's an overwhelmingly positive message. You don't see anything negative about those ads. However, those Super Bowl ads, which cost He Gets Us $20 million, did receive strong backlash online, including from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who simply tweeted this: "Something tells me Jesus would not spend millions of dollars on Super Bowl ads to make fascism look benign." And by their own description, He Gets Us is a nonprofit organization with the stated goal of helping people understand the authentic Jesus as he's depicted in the Bible, the Jesus of radical forgiveness, compassion, and love. But what they've promoted in the past really does go against that message. The problem is most people don't know that, and putting out an unnuanced tweet that compares the ads that we saw during the Super Bowl to fascism isn't gonna necessarily play well.
Okay, no, but there's twist after twist in this story.
Are there?
Yes, because Charlie Kirk also hates the ads. So AOC and Charlie Kirk agree the ads are bad. Okay, but for completely different reasons. Okay, and I think this is a very nuanced conversation. I love the ads. The reason behind the ads and what the organization is doing is a different question. But first, let's give you AOC and Charlie Kirk, and then we'll give you what the organization is actually doing.
I don't know what Charlie Kirk had to say.
No, I got you.
Okay, so AOC just tweeted that. Something tells me Jesus would not spend millions of dollars on Super Bowl ads to make fascism look benign. Can we stop using the fascism label on everything you dislike?
Yeah, this is not fascism, no. And by the way, there's potential bigotry, et cetera, we'll talk about in a second.
Yep.
But I don't see how this is fascism at all, okay? So Charlie Kirk tweeted, the marketing group behind He Gets Us has done one of the worst services to Christianity in the modern era. The Green family are decent, wonderful people who have been taken for a ride by these woke tricksters. So sad. So wait, are they fascists or woke tricksters? I'm starting to get confused. So here's why the two different sides don't like it. The left wing doesn't like it because a lot of the money they raise then goes towards right-wing groups that take away our rights, right? The reason the right wing doesn't like them, because they're showing a progressive Jesus, one that loves everyone. So Charlie Kirk's like, this is terrible. Remember, no, Jesus is all about hatred. Hate the immigrants, hate people that aren't like you, hate is awesome. Why are they showing a Jesus that loves people? Woke tricksters. Have you ever read the Bible? God, these guys are hilarious.
I don't know, Charlie. It might have to do with the fact that belief in religious institutions is at an all-time low. And it might have to do with the fact that young people especially are less likely to be interested in these religious organizations because of the hatred they preach, the hatred they represent, the hatred that you want them to represent so boldly in Super Bowl ads apparently. Maybe this has to do with trying to recruit new parishioners, and it's real hard to do that when you display, some of the more nefarious things that have been funded by the organization behind these ads, right? So that's what AOC is referencing, and it's totally fine to reference that. But when you just put out a tweet in response to an ad that looks lovely, that most people don't know the details about behind the scenes, then it's gonna look crazy when you just put out this like one sentence tweet that compares it to fascism. Do you get what I'm saying?
Literally everyone I know that watched that ad was either liked it or loved it, right? So the ads are super effective, and if it's a trick, then let's point out that it's a trick. But without even saying that it's a trick, to say those ads are fascist makes everybody who watched them, which is tons of people during the Super Bowl, go, wow, you are weirdo radical. Like, how is that fascist? That's telling you that Jesus was accepted. How could that be fascist? Look at those two, look at the kids hugging. Okay.
Right, if you look at that and you don't know anything else, you don't know about the organization behind it or whatever, that's all you see. And then you go on Twitter and you see AOC compare it to fascism. Like, how does she not know? Like, the biggest mistake anyone can make, whether you're in the news or in politics, is assuming that everyone knows what you know. Not everyone knows what you know, AOC. Like, what are you doing? Okay, so let's actually get to the details here and what I think motivated her to put that tweet out. So last week, TYT did talk about this, and as JR had shared with you last Friday, He Gets Us is a subsidiary of the Servant Foundation, which is a Kansas-based charity also known as the Signatory, that says it exists to inspire and facilitate revolutionary biblical generosity. But between 2018 and 2020, the Servant Foundation donated more than $50 million to the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is also a nonprofit that's led big policy fights over abortion and non-discrimination laws at the Supreme Court and in states around the country. The nonprofit is designated as an anti-LGBTQ+ hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Again, that is bad, obviously, but most people don't know that. So you have to explain it so you can have people understand why you're attacking the ads, which on the surface look lovely, right? Now, the Alliance Defending Freedom says it helped draft the 2018 Mississippi abortion law at the heart of last year's Supreme Court decision the Dobbs decision, of course, which reversed Roe v. Wade. Now the alliance is leading a new Supreme Court case arguing that businesses should be able to discriminate against LGBTQ+ customers. And as far as where he gets their funding from, some of the money has come from billionaire David Green, the devout Christian co-founder of the arts and crafts chain Hobby Lobby. Green and Hobby Lobby fought the Obama administration's contraception mandate all the way to the Supreme Court, leading to a 2014 ruling finding that closely held corporations do not have to comply with the mandate if their owners voice religious objections. So that's the issue with the people behind the ad. That is what motivated the tweet coming from AOC. Now, Cenk, fill us in more on this whole right-wing backlash to the ad.
Yeah, and then I want to tell you where I come out on it. So they really don't like that they're making Jesus look progressive. But he is. As I explained in my book, Justice is Coming, we'll put the link down below. Jesus was pretty much a communist. If you're shocked by that, that means you haven't read the Bible at all. Jesus is so far to the left of me, it's not even close. One of our members just wrote in on YouTube, and Not Equipped wrote in, Jesus was the most woke. Yeah, not only did he wash the feet of the poor, prostitutes, immigrants, etc., he said, give away all of your worldly possessions and come follow me to help the poor and the needy, right? I wouldn't do that, okay? And giving away all of your worldly possessions is literally communist, okay? So you can't get any further left than Jesus. He threw out who? The money changers, the bankers. That was the very first thing he did, right? So the very last thing the right wing wants you to find out is who Jesus actually was. And so if you find out how progressive Jesus is, it ruins their whole scam. Their whole scam is, no, Jesus was super greedy and he loved prosperity preachers and tax cuts for the rich. And my God, did he love corporations. I mean, they're a joke, but they've tricked hundreds of millions of people into believing this madness. So they're saying to these guys who are right wingers, guys, stop the ads, stop the ads. You're gonna accidentally get people to find out Jesus is the biggest lefty in the history of the world, right? He makes Karl Marx blush for how left he is. So now back to what do I think? Well, Anna, we're in a tough spot, right? Because so the $50 million they spent is among the most they spent, this group did, to help this really right-wing legal organization do these terrible things. But tons of religious people are anti-choice and anti-gay. I don't know what to do with them. So I think those are awful positions, awful, and I fight against them daily. But they are religious positions, not of every religious person, not of every Christian person, of course, right? But of a significant chunk. So are we gonna say that all those people who believe that are fascists? I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea. I think we have to somehow try to convince them, although we do have to fight them in the battlefield of ideas and in the arena, etc. So I think that getting people to see the real Jesus is more subversive and the better way to go than to just yell at him in this case. So overall, be careful with the group. And I gotta tell you the very important thing. Why are they doing these ads in the first place? And why do they keep saying he's for all of us? And they keep showing young people all over the ads, right?
Because they're trying to recruit young people into their religious organizations.
Okay, and the reason for that is because religiosity among the young is doing this in the graphs. Nose diving. Among young people, almost nobody believes in religion anymore. So much of the young have stopped believing in religion that in the 1990s, 90% of Americans believed in religion. Now it's down to 63%. And almost all the older people still believe in it.
I want to talk about this further in our members only bonus episode today, because for the longest time, I thought that was a good thing and only a good thing. But it's actually far more complicated than that. There are some pretty significant downsides to the lack of membership in religious organizations that I want to discuss in the bonus episode for our members. If you're not a member, you can become one by going to tyt.com/join, or if you're watching us on YouTube, you can become a member by clicking on that join button as well. I have some nuanced opinions on this. Some might be controversial, but I think it's important to talk about.
We're going to do that in members only.
Yeah.
Come join us there.
All right, for now though, we're gonna take a brief break, and when we come back, I'll talk about how Republicans want to prevent legislation banning child marriage in Wyoming. Awesome.
Oh my God, in and out. And I'm like, my controversial non-political opinion is that it's overrated.
All right, back during the social break here. I'm gonna read random ones because I didn't get a chance to highlight these. AJ and Esther on Twitch says, the very best news reporting available and the best community here on Twitch. Keep up the good work. Thank you, AJ, we appreciate it. XX Nate Dog XX writes in, 17 months of Bezos bucks, poggers. Given to understand that is a positive thing. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get free membership on Twitch to us by going to tyt.com/prime. Injustifiable says 25 months, where has the time gone? Love you all, love you right back. Cy Foxicus writes in, we do have an inadequate coverage of weather radars. Let's invest in that so we can actually know who's in danger of damaging tornadoes. Nope, shoot them all down. I prefer that they have a trigger finger. They're a comedy show, man, and yet they take them seriously. Batman Zero writes in, we don't have a missile defense system because we gave it to Israel. Well, we talked about that earlier. It's halfway literal, okay? Now, all right, let's keep going. Groove Dragon writes in, my sister-in-law lives in a dingbat in quotes residence in San Francisco. She and my brother, dearly departed, had to spend a fortune to strengthening the basement storage garage area. They never complained because earthquakes are actually a thing, and they will actually kill you. Yes, and so Japan has invested tons of money into making sure that their homes and buildings are earthquake resistant. And by the way, they got hit with a 9.0. Right now, you remember Fukushima, and that was a giant problem that they had. But you didn't see 30,000 buildings collapse in a 9.0 earthquake that happened off the coast, right? That's a monster earthquake. Octo Squiddies with a comment I love. Yes, I would like to speak with the manager of Exxon. No, I will not hold. That's for the people complaining about woke companies. Cody the Epilepsy Dragon says, Cenk, do you think that was a hold last night in the final minutes of the Super Bowl last night? No, I bet money on the Chiefs, so it was not a hold.
Dude.
What?
But why did the Eagles leave them wide open 2 times in a row? What's wrong with them? Like, I'm happy they did. I bet money too.
Yeah.
So yeah. I bet on the right team.
Yeah. So no, Andy Reid is awesome, one of the greatest coaches of all time, and he just outcoached their defense. Okay, he just did. And Mahomes is the greatest quarterback, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, maybe the greatest. We'll find out. Anyways, guys, it was definitely a hold. Why do I say that? At the time, I wasn't sure at all. Even though I wanted the Chiefs to win, I was like, I don't know if I want the game decided on that. Afterwards, Bradbury, the guy who did the holding, did something incredibly classy. He said, yeah, I held him. Okay, and Sirianni said that's not what decided the game. That's the coach of the Eagles. Every Eagles player was so classy. The Eagles, Philly. Great job, Philly. Nice work. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Esquiddy just became a member, so we appreciate it. They hit the join button below. You can do likewise. Come support honest news reporting. Casper.
Well, let's talk about what's happening in Wyoming. The Wyoming Republican Party is seeking to kill a bill working its way through the state legislature that would ban child marriage under the age of 16. Because I guess child marriage makes sense. Now, conservatives in the state argue that putting arbitrary limits on child marriage actually interferes with parental rights, okay? That's what they're concerned about here. Now, the bill, which already passed the Republican-controlled Wyoming House of Representatives on a 36-25 vote last month, proposes banning state residents from marrying anyone under the age of 16, which should not be controversial, while requiring anyone under the age of 18 seeking to get married to receive written consent from their parents under the eye of a competent witness. Now, the bill, I should note, has been sponsored by a Republican lawmaker. His name is Dan Zwanitzer. He's an openly gay Republican who's actually helped to defeat a number of anti-LGBT bills in Wyoming. So even though he's a Republican, big ups to him. Sounds like he is, pretty principled in wanting to protect people, at least in this specific context. Now, currently Wyoming is one of, get this, just 8 states in the country, including, and I didn't know this, California, Michigan, Mississippi, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Washington, and West Virginia without a minimum age requirement for marriage. And it currently ranks among the top 10 states in the country for child marriages, according to a 2021 study by advocacy group Unchained at Last. Now, let's take a look at this map of the United States and I'll explain what it shows you, what it tells you. So the states that are shaded in red indicate that you need to be 18 years old in order to get married. So there's only 2 states. The states shaded in blue have an age requirement of 17. Believe it or not, North Carolina is the state that says you can get married at age 14. Like what?
Wow.
What? Okay, so I just thought that was a really interesting, broader look at what's transpiring in the United States when it comes to child marriage. Now, efforts to raise the age of marriage in the state have consistently stalled, while a number of child marriages nationally has been in steady free fall over the last decades. Just 7 states to date have voted to ban it entirely, even as countries like the Philippines passed national laws banning the practice. And so when we talk about parental rights, or when conservatives who want to defeat this bill talk about parental rights, what are they referring to? They're referring to, let's say, a 16-year-old or someone even younger than 16, if she gets pregnant, regardless, by the way, of how she gets pregnant, the conservative parents might want to force her into marriage. So that's what they're referring to here when they talk about parental rights.
Yeah. So here are Republicans all over the country saying people should be allowed to have sex with and then marry kids under 18. I thought that's what groomers did.
Let me give you an exact statement from the Wyoming Republican Party, because I don't want to put words in their mouths. It's really important for you to understand what their rationale is here. Marriage is the only institution in Wyoming statute designed to keep a child's father and mother living under the same roof and cooperating in the raising of any children that they together conceive. That is the natural right of every child. That is what they're arguing. So let's also keep in mind that according to Unchained at Last in the United States, no, let's not go to that graphic yet. There is no graphic for this. Approximately 60,000 marriages, child marriages, have happened since the year 2000, where the spousal age differences could be considered a sex crime. Okay, meaning the male in the relationship or the marriage is much, much, much older than the underaged girl who's now getting married to this person.
Yeah. So look, it was actually looked like it was on a path to pass. So they're saying, hey, you got to be at least 16 to get married, and you need a parent's signature. I mean, this is bare minimum to protect against pedophiles. Forget groomers, pedophiles. Okay, and at the last second, the Republicans got cold feet, and the reason is because right-wing organizations, including religious organizations, came out and were like, no. we like that the children can get married, okay? Let's procreate and do more white kids. Let's go, okay? And you get start them early, you know what I'm saying? It's not so bad. These are the religious people. Yeah, sure. Anyway, the group that organized them are called Wyoming Family Watch. And so apparently they want to watch young kids getting married to older men. And so this is the right wing in America. Oh, we're so worried about groomers and pedophiles and stuff. Oh, you got a 14-year-old? Oh, let's get him married. 16-year-old? Oh, come on. You got to wait till 16 to get married? Why not 15? Come on. And by the way, they're like, when they say get married, I don't know that there's restrictions on how old the guy can be. Right?
No, exactly. That's exactly right.
So can a 45-year-old marry a 15-year-old? Is it become kosher and literally legal in Wyoming as long as they call it a marriage?
Again, let me just, according to Unchained at Last, in the United States, approximately 60,000 marriages have happened since 2000, where the spousal age differences could have been considered a sex crime, allowing a marriage license to become a sort of get out of jail free card for a would-be rapist, particularly if they impregnate the victim.
And guys, Democrats, please, do you exist? You exist, Democrats? This is a layup. Why don't you introduce a bill that says nationally you're not allowed to get married if you're under 18? And then you force the Republicans to either say, no, we want kids under 18 having sex as long as it's inside a marriage, and we don't care how old the husband is, the guy is in the relationship, or you win and you protect children. It's a win-win either way.
Well, remember, when it comes to girls or women getting pregnant and dealing with an unwanted pregnancy, the response from the far right is punish them. And in this case, oh, you got pregnant? No abortion. You must carry the pregnancy to term, and we're gonna pressure you to marry the person who impregnated you, even if the person who impregnated you is much older than you, might have actually been a situation where there was not consent in the sexual behavior or activity. Like, that's what's happening here. I mean, the whole ideology against reproductive rights, and it goes far beyond the anti-abortion movement. It also has to do with the anti-contraception movement, is about punishing women who might feel free to express their sexuality and engage in sexual activity before marriage. We're all supposed to abide by what their religious doctrine dictates. And that's not what this country is supposed to be about. This country is supposed to be tolerant of a diversity of ideas, a diversity of beliefs. My belief is not that you should punish someone who has sex before marriage at all.
Anna, you know what it reminded me of? We did a story a long time ago from one of the Central Asian republics, like Tajikistan or something. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact country, but in that region. And there's still some leftovers of an ancient culture there where in the Central Asian steppes, different tribes would go and kidnap women from the other tribes, and then they would rape them. And then once they did, though, the parents of the woman would go and convince the victim to marry their assailant, because that was culture, right? Man, this looks awfully similar to that, right? So where the parents are like, no. I mean, we want to make sure that we don't ruin our morals and our honor. And the way that we do that is marry them off, and then it's all official and okay and moral.
You know what my culture is? Okay, my culture is no one should get married before 30. It should be banned. Everyone should be forced to wait until they're 30 before they get married. Now look, those are my values. I'm not gonna force them on other people. But if you're in your early 20s and you're thinking about getting married, please just wait till you're at least 25, okay? Just wait. It's gonna be all right. You can get married, just give it a little bit of time.
But here's what I'm absolutely positive of. You can't have all the right-wingers and Republicans complaining about pedophilia and then wanting to make it legal.
100%, 100%. All right, we've got 2 minutes left, but the bonus episode is gonna be amazing. We're gonna talk about a man who moved away from his family for 7 months in an effort to lose weight. Apparently he doesn't have a job and has the resources to make that happen. And I don't know, for some reason, weirdly salty about it. So we'll discuss that in the bonus. And then I'll talk about why I think there is a negative side to less and less people belonging to any religious organization.
Interesting. I can't wait for that. All right, I'm going to read one comment here because I have time. And I don't even know where it's going to lead, so let's have fun. Progressive TYT says, I remember seeing Cenk in 2008 when I was a junior in high school. I had zero guidance as a child. I'm so glad I finally tried Twitch. Thanks for making me the good man I am today, Cenk. Whoa, man, I'm glad I read that. Okay, love you too, Casper, and John and Ben and JR, yada, yada. Guys, thank you for saying that. It's just wonderful. And every time I see a comment like that, it makes me feel like, thank God I did this. And it's not a thing that I often feel. Okay, so any positive impact we had on your lives rebounds back to us 1,000-fold. So thank you for sharing that. We love you for it. And members, let's get that to more people, and we can. All right, anyways, we'll talk more about it in the post game. tyt.com/join. We'll see you there in a minute.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media